Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson, World Alternative Media here, and we are joined by Vince Sorace, the CEO of Kutcho Copper. And first of all, thank you very much for joining us, sir.
Thanks for having me, Josh.
Now, the thing is, a lot of our audience, they love gold and silver. I love gold and silver, but there's more to the metals market than gold and silver. And I really wanted to go into copper today. I've seen you talk on multiple programs. You have a really interesting insight into this subject matter. So first of all, if we could just start off by talking a bit about why copper? Why is copper such a valuable metal going forward?
Yeah, as you mentioned, a lot of people are a lot more familiar with the gold and the silver markets, but copper. We have to remember that copper's traditional uses, is all they're all around us, from infrastructure. I mean, every wire you see in the sky, all the power grids, all your electronics, all your appliances, construction, transportation, renewable generation. Those things all contain and need to function with copper. So copper is an element of every one of our daily lives. If you, from that perspective, we're also seeing now another leg up with respect to copper and its applications. You think of electric vehicles, and to keep it simple, our electric vehicles now will use about 4 times as much copper in them than your conventional cars. Renewables, wind, solar. I mean, that's been a movement for some time, and the infrastructure around those. There's a lot of copper used with respect to all this. So, I guess maybe a more simpler way to think about it is on that side of things that, everyone talks about this green revolution, and everybody wants the planet to be more green. Copper is required to do that, and plays into this. It's also a sustainable metal, and it's 100% recyclable.
Yeah, that's a huge movement too. I mean, everywhere you go, you see that green movement push forward. And if copper is used so primarily in so many of these alternative methods of transportation, of energy, that's going to be huge. And I wanted to go into something else because, we talk a lot here about scarcity and how that creates so much demand. And there is a projected deficit for copper going forward. I've seen you present your charts before regarding the projected deficit for copper. I wanted to talk a little bit about how that affects supply and demand from your perspective. Can you talk a bit about that?
Sure. And, let's start at, where the heart of this comes from. As I said earlier, copper is used in a lot of things that we surround ourselves in our daily lives. And, that's driven by population, right? So that happens because of, people on our planet. People want to use all these new things. People need infrastructure as the population increases. So, that's where this demand is being driven, because people need copper. And then again, I mentioned, this more kind of this greener, if you will, revolution that people are demanding now as well. That plays into where all this is coming from. Mm-hmm. And if you look at what's happened on the demand side with copper, taking it back 100 years, copper's demand has increased over 2,500% in the last 100 years. It's forecast to continue to increase about an additional 43% here over the next 15 years. So, it stems from there, and the, everyone from strategics to corporates to analysts are all right now seeing the impact here of the demand side on copper, and what's driving that forward, as well as the supply side. And just to touch on the supply side, what's been happening in the last number of years in the mining industry is, in 10, 20 years, you've got declining grade curves. So those, and same thing in silver and gold. When you have that high grade, it makes a lot of problems go away. But the declining grade curve on copper is quite significant over the last 20 years. So you've got less grade in deposits. You've got basically these copper deposits are big, and the ones that move the needle are big. These are mines that, take 20 years to come online from when they're found. And they're expensive to put into production. These are multi-billion-dollar capital type projects. It's not like that in the gold and silver space. Some of them are, but primarily not like that. So we're in a bit of a paradox with respect to that, on the supply side right now, and that's what's happening. So you've got demand side increases, and you've got some pressures coming in on the supply side.
And if you don't mind, could you go a bit into the correlation between the U.S.-China trade deal and the copper prices going forward?
Yeah, the U.S.-China trade deal is an interesting one because what we've seen come out of that is a lot of people scared about an economic slowdown, if you will. And copper is tied to economic drivers as well. So I think a lot of that rhetoric right now between the U.S. and China has been depressing copper prices for the last probably 6-7 months. We've seen just recently in the last week or two, we've seen copper prices starting to jump, and we're hovering just under $3 a pound right now. And that's been driven for two reasons. One, because people are starting to see that the ice is cracking with respect to that the trade war with the U.S. and China, and we're just starting to see some of these shortages of copper stocks in warehouses come to light. Literally, just in the last week, it's becoming real. So, I think with respect to the U.S. and China, I think that gets resolved. I think it'll be an interesting catalyst to copper prices in the short term.
Absolutely. Well, before we go into the mining industry, I wanted to ask you a little bit about where you see copper going in 2019, because I know predictions are dangerous. I'm not asking you to give us a price or anything like that, but the market seems to be trending upwards, as you mentioned. Do you see us in being in a really good position for the year 2019?
2019 is when there's a number of analysts out there that are starting to forecast that supply side problem commencing in 2019, and they're seeing and forecasting that right through the next probably half a decade to decade. So yeah, I think the impact is now. And as I mentioned, there was an interesting article that came out last week with respect to stock sitting in warehouses, and it just all of a sudden wasn't there. So yeah, no, I think we're in the midst of it. So I think it's a bit of a perfect storm with respect to our earlier conversation in China and the current prices, and what's going to be happening through 2019, 20, 21, and 22 and onwards on the supply shortages.
Yeah, well, it's great to see some movement as well. As you mentioned, I want to talk about Kutcho Copper. This is a company that I've seen, it's really starting to play with, the market from the perspective of you have major agreements with Wheaton Precious Metals, for example, and this company is a huge deal. Can you explain this relationship and how rare it is to secure such financial backing, and then kind of just go into what Kutcho Copper does?
Yeah, so we've been talking a lot about copper. Well, that's what Kutcho is. Kutcho's a high-grade copper zinc advanced stage development project located in British Columbia, in Canada. So I guess there's two important parts to that sentence. One is it's high-grade copper, and two, we are in a very safe jurisdiction. So, those should be two boxes that investors, want to see and want to tick off in investing in any project: copper, silver, gold, etc. Kutcho is one of these smaller, high-margin projects. The grade that I mentioned lends itself to that. But we put out a pre-feasibility study last year, so significantly de-risked the project. It's showing significant returns in that pre-feasibility study with a net present value of $265 million and an IRR of 28%. And I should add that we priced in that pre-feasibility study was priced at $2.75 copper. and there are extreme sensitivities and leverage to the copper price with respect to our economics.
Yeah, yeah, I know you've drilled successfully and are moving forward. You're considered to be one of the greatest mining companies in Canada, my home country, and I know a lot of people have been talking about it lately. I've had a few comments as well on YouTube about your company, and I just have to ask, for the sake of our viewers, before we talk a bit more about Kutcho, why mining instead of, for example, just holding it? I get a lot of comments about mining companies, and it seems to be split 50-50 between investing in mining companies and then holding the metals themselves. Can you go into that a little bit?
We've got significant leverage, if you will, built into us right now. Obviously, more risk when you buy a mining company than holding the commodity itself. But you probably at some point, I'm sure everyone's heard this. Probably some diversification is great. But if you want levers to the upside, and you're buying, a company like ours right now at basically a multiple of a 0.1 times price to NAV, you've got significant upside leverage. And when you have companies that are at the point we're at, and what we're coming up to here is we're going to be completing our feasibility study, and that means significant de-risking of the project. And then we'll be in production in 3 or 4 years. At that point, those re-rates that occur, you have the potential to, and with escalating copper prices, those become exponential potentials. So when you go from a 0.1 times PNAV to, post pre-fees in the next 6 months, where you can see comparables out there trading at a 0.4, 0.5. So there's a 4 to 5 times lift. And then closer to production, the higher that multiple goes. And with any escalation in copper prices, like I said, you get that additional leverage to the upside. So, that's where you take a little bit more risk, but, the reward is there for that as well.
Well, sure. I mean, one of the big things about metals is that they are great wealth insurance. Now, they're longer term investments, but when you get into the mining companies, you actually have something to invest with that provides potentially more of an upside over the short term, which is something that a lot of people, it's the same reason that a lot of people invest in, ETFs and stuff like that. It's because, who wants to wait 30 years for an investment to turn over when they can wait a couple years to potentially make a good, profit off of it. So that's a huge part of why we talk to people that are working with mining companies, is that there's actually more of a potential, profit that could be made, though, like you said, a little bit more risky. Of course, always do your own due diligence, folks. But I wanted to ask you about your 4-part plan that you lay out, because I know you do have a very interesting strategy going forward. Can you go into that a bit?
Sure, and I guess the one thing that I'm going to backtrack a bit and touch on here is Wheaton Precious Metals' involvement in the company, and because of everything that we've just talked about, and Kutcho being a good project, that was something that Wheaton Precious Metals is one of the premier streaming companies on the street. They've got an exceptional team. They've done exceptionally well. And, they only get involved in good projects. So there was an opportunity here for us to do something with them. And it was a 3-prong approach for Wheaton. We did a traditional stream with them on the precious metal component of the project. But Wheaton also did a big equity component in us. They wrote a $4 million check into a financing with us. They also did a $20 million debt facility with us to help us acquire the project back in 2017 that we paid $30 million for. So, that's a little out of Wheaton's wheelhouse. We're the first time that they've actually provided a loan facility to acquire the asset. So that I think that that speaks to the merits of the project to have that backing from Wheaton, in this.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the sounds of it, you're pretty bullish going forward when it comes to the mining industry. I wanted to just go into your 4-part plan a little bit. You do lay out a very interesting strategy for Kutcho Copper. Can you lay that out a little bit?
Sure. When we acquired this project, the strategy was always to, the quickest path to completing our feasibility study, which is, de-risking the project and permitting and getting this thing into production. So, we acquired this project at the end of 2017. In 2018, we put probably about $15 million to work on the project. So in the field there, we went back and we did a bunch of drilling that, from geotechnical drilling to metallurgical drilling, but, we also did a bunch of resource expansion drilling, engaged in our baseline studies. So, all of that stuff that could happen in one field season to get that feasibility study done and get into the permitting process. So our strategy right now is to get this into production as quickly as we can. That's when you're going to get, the biggest re-rates or the biggest multiples on a project. So, we had all that work happen last year. We're now compiling all the data. You're going to see the results of that data, which I think is going to be exciting. Over the course of the next number of weeks, month, that'll kind of show the key components to that feasibility study, from a resource update to our MET program to filing our project description and getting us into that permitting process, and ultimately our feasibility study in the coming 6 months or so. So, on the heels of that, we can continue. By no means do we think we've, finished expanding the size of this project. That was one of the big things that we saw when we purchased the project from Capstone, that there was scalability here. I think, we'll be able to demonstrate that. That remains an opportunity moving forward. So, I think it's an interesting opportunity from a number of perspectives.
Yeah, there's so many opportunities in this current market that, while there's a lot of people bearish on the stock market, people are getting more and more bullish with metals markets, more than they have since like 2012, from my own memory anyway. And I think it's very exciting to look at industry like copper that has such bullish sentiment going forward, and to be involved in a company that is, of course, spearheading this and has so much bullish, companies and investors and people getting excited about it. I think this is a really great thing. For our audience, before we go, can you tell our audience your pitch, your why they should get involved with Kutcho?
Kutcho is, if you want leverage if you believe in the copper markets, and you want leverage in the space, and you want to put some risk capital to work, Kutcho is a great project. As we talked about earlier, it's been de-risked significantly. It's a very advanced stage project, and it's trading cheap. I think, we're trading at a market cap of about $21 million Canadian right now. And that's how I kind of got to those multiples. So, if you want exposure to this, the space, I think Kutcho is a place you need to be.
Absolutely. Now, as I always mention to our audience, do your own due diligence. We don't give advice here, but we do spotlight incredible companies that are doing incredible things that I think everyone should look into. I think it's great to have a way to access this information, and you don't find it a lot on television. Honestly, there's not a lot of talk about this market because it's really growing right now, more than it has in a long time. As I mentioned, Vince, as we close it off, can you tell people where they can get involved in the company, where they can invest, and where they can find out more information?
Sure. You can take a look at our website. We're at www.kutcho.ca. And we trade on the TSX Venture Exchange under the ticker symbol KC.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. I hope to talk with you again soon about the copper industry, as it looks like we're going to see some action in the next year or so. So I really appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you.
Like what you see here, WAM? Don't forget to check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We can't do it without you. Any donation is very much appreciated, especially as we are so heavily demonetized and censored by YouTube, as these guys come in and flag all of our content as hate speech. The shadow banning is getting really bad, guys. Also, check our Bitcoin address right here on the screen or in the description below. We really appreciate it. And of course, check us out at the Red Pill Expo 2019. Of course, the great G. Edward Griffin and so many other incredible
incredible speakers will be there. Our link for that is below as well. And we cannot forget Mike Maloney's goldsilver.com, which you can also find in the description. One of the greatest market and monetary historians out there. We really encourage everyone to check that out. But until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.
I'm sure you have already changed people's minds in your young age because you're involved, and I like that.